Welcome to another Sunday update video. I also post build videos on most Wednesdays, so be sure to check those out as well. Today, we're going to talk about the Fiat and the Jeep. So, for the Fiat, I've got old Henry here hanging out in the Fiat for now. He was in the Model T for Halloween, but since Halloween is over, it's time for him to go back in storage. But until that happens, I decided to put him in here because why not? But the next step is going to be to figure out the front suspension. The front suspension will determine how we build the rear suspension, and the rear suspension will determine where the engine goes. So we'll start at the front. The challenge we have with the front suspension is that we can't really narrow it at all. As you can see, we really barely have enough room right now for our feet to fit in here to work the pedals, so we can't make it any more narrow than it already is. The front control arms are already very short, so there's not a lot of room here to move the front wheels in. And my goal is to have the wheels and tires sit within the fender well if possible. Now I don't have the wheels yet, but I have ordered them and hopefully they'll be here soon. Once they get here, I'll be able to determine whether or not they're going to fit inside this fender well. If they don't, I'll have to cut this out and add fender flares. But once I know if the wheels are going to stick out of the front or not, then I can determine how to build the rear suspension, because I can always make the wheels in the back stick out to match the front. And then I would of course have fender flares over both the front and the rear wheels. This front subframe is from a Mazda Miata. It's an early NA Miata. And the plan is to take this spindle and make it fit this car. So I will be cutting this upper control arm and the lower control arm, and I will be adapting them to fit this. So I'll basically be making kind of a combination between this existing upper control arm and the Mazda control arm to make that ball joint fit. I will also have to custom make a lower control arm. Right now it just has this leaf spring which gives it its spring, but I'm going to be getting rid of that and making an entirely new control arm. But I have to determine exactly where to make that hinge, which is a very crucial decision, because if you do it wrong, then it's going to cause bump steer and it's going to cause other suspension geometry issues. So that's one thing I have to worry about. And then once that's done, I will be building a pushrod cantilever type suspension. So there will be a pushrod that goes up, and then there will actually be some shocks in the trunk under the hood. The other thing I've been doing is getting some materials that I need. So I've got some tubing here, and you can see I've even done a test bend on this piece of tube. I also bought a tube bender. Now, it turns out tube benders are pretty expensive, and there's kind of a big learning curve when it comes to bending tube, as when it comes to the material and the dies you need and all those things. So I bought basically the cheapest bender I could find that had a few different dies for different size tubing. So hopefully this is going to work for what I need. And honestly, I don't really need that many complex bends, so this should be fine. I do plan on building a roll bar. So I'll need to do some bends here to make a roll bar that goes back here behind the seats, and there'll be the crossbar which will support the 5 harness seat belts. I don't know how crazy I'm going to go with this. I don't know if I'm going to build a full roll cage or just a roll bar, but I am going to be building at least a roll bar back here. I will also be using some of the tubing to build the new rear subframe. So what you see down there, that is a stock Miata subframe. It came from the same car as the front subframe. And I will be using most of that. So that's going to be a lot easier back here than what I'm having to do up front. I have plenty of room to work with back here, so I'll use most of that subframe. However, I will have to narrow it. But in addition to that, I will also have to build an entire frame back here to support that subframe, that suspension, and then also it'll be built up to eventually hold the engine and whatever else I need to connect the engine to the rear axles. So the plan is to build most of that out of tubing. But so basically that's what's going on with the Fiat. And that's why there's probably not going to be a build video out on Wednesday on this car. The things that I need to do to it are just a little bit too complex to rush. And there's a pretty big learning curve. I don't have any experience building race cars. I don't normally modify cars to this extent. So there's a big learning curve for me on this one, which I enjoy. I'm very much enjoying this process. And I think this is going to be a great project, but it is going to take a little while, and there are some things I can't rush. The front suspension is definitely one of the things I can't rush. Okay, so now we will talk about the Jeep. So this is the '89 Jeep YJ. It's the Islander package. And things are coming along really well with this. In fact, it actually runs now. You can see it actually runs pretty good. So yeah, as you can see, it's actually running very well. So that's not the issue. The issue I'm having is with the fuel tank. So when I went to put fuel in it so that I could get it running, it just dumped gas right on the ground. And you can see these hoses here, they're all cracked and the gas just pours out of them. It's very common. I've had the same issue on other Jeeps that I've owned. So that wasn't that big of a deal. I was able to get enough fuel into the tank, even though a lot of it leaked out, that I could get it running. But that wasn't the real issue. The real issue is right here. So you can see there's actually a hole, there's a crack, and there's a hole in the gas tank. So once I did finally get enough fuel in there for it to run, it just kept leaking out. For days it was leaking out, and then I finally discovered that hole. So now I've got the Jeep jacked up on this one side so that it's sitting at a slant, so that keeps the little bit of fuel that's in the tank from leaking out. Now I've ordered a new fuel tank, but it's not going to be here in time for me to get a video out next week. So for that reason, there also won't be a video out for the Jeep. However, we are making good progress. It runs, so that's great news. So this thing should be back on the road very soon. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this week, guys. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Bye.